and keep admitting people here. Yeah, so welcome to this meetup tonight, where Bas Dijkstra will present for us. And I will briefly explain what passion for testing is, since there are very many new people today. We are a non-profit organization. Yada, based in Gothenburg. And we are for everyone that has a passion for testing and organizing meetups like this. But before Corona, it was only physical events, but as everyone else, we had to change. So now we're doing virtual event as well. And we are also partnered with the Ministry of Testing. And Bas might give us a talk about how to do better test automation. So it's still people going up. So maybe give it a couple of more minutes and then start.
Sure. Can you, is there a way for you, Jonas, to mute everybody automatically as the organizer?
Looking at me, wondering if that would change somehow. Maybe a better person.
That's only me. I think I need to go through the list then. Yeah, but maybe everyone could mute themselves so we're not disturbed. I think everyone is muted now.
Yeah, so I took the liberty of unmuting myself again.
Yeah,
so that's probably a good idea. Also,
yeah, but I think you can start now.
Yeah,
I
saw one comment in the chat from Jos, who said there's a lot of comments in the meetup. I don't know if that was related to us accidentally ending up in the wrong at the wrong Zoom meeting just a couple of minutes earlier, but it looks like we're good to go. So that was it for your introduction, Jonas?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks to everybody's here for taking some time out of their day to join this meetup, join this talk. As Jonas already said, this is going to be recorded, so means I got to be careful with what I say, and but I'm sure we'll be fine. That also means that if you want to re-watch this talk at some later point in time, or you have to drop out at some moment, there's always going to be the recording for you to watch at another point in time. Jonas, can you quickly confirm that you can see my screen now?
Yes, I also muted.
Yes. Okay, so you can still see my screen now, right? With this horrible green text on black background, 80s-like. So this is as far as my design skills go. Again, thank you all for joining us, for taking some time out of your day to attend this meetup. My name is Bas Dijkstra. You did a wonderful job of pronouncing my last name, by the way, Jonas. Have you been practicing, or? I can't hear you. You're muted, but.
Okay. I said no. I just tried.
Okay, you did it is a pretty tough last name for a lot of people from outside the Netherlands to pronounce, but you did very well. So yeah, I'm going to share with you over the next, say, 45 minutes about how I'm going to talk to you about how I think you can become a better test automation engineer. And basically, this is my idea of what it takes to become a good test automation engineer. Why am I talking about this? Because I think it's important. And I think, sadly, not enough people and teams and organizations really get what it takes to do this wonderful craft well. And a lot of people don't realize enough yet what it takes to become a good test automation engineer. My career, I've been working in this field for some 15 years now. And until, sadly, not too long ago, this was me, really. This was me, basically. By the way, if you've never seen the movie Office Space, it comes highly recommended. It's slowly starting to get a little dated because it's just over 20 years old today. But there are so many office work cliches in there that are still incredibly relevant today. This is Milton, and Milton gets shoved into a corner in this film and gets handed a lot of paperwork, and is the only expectation that people have of him is to complete all that paperwork. And that's basically what a lot of my test automation efforts looked like for too long, for a too big a part of the 15 years that I've been working in test automation. How did it work? People, I was basically tasked. I came in with teams, with organizations. I've always been an external consultant. I was also always brought in to automate the testing, automate all of the testing, or at least as much of the testing as possible. So, and what that looked like in practice is that people gave me these large stacks of regression test scripts that teams used to execute manually or by hand, and asked me to, well, can you automate these for us, please? Because just executing them is way too boring, and it takes too much time, it takes too much effort, it slows us down. We don't want to do it anymore. Please automate this for us. So that's what a lot of my work looked like, especially for the first 7, 8, 9 years of my career. Here are your regression test scripts. Please don't come out of your corner or out of your room until they're all automated. And this sounds like a good idea in theory, really. So you have these huge stack of regression test scripts that it takes a lot of people to execute them. It takes a lot of time to execute them. It's lots of people. It's incredibly boring because they're the same test scripts over and over and over again. So why not automate them away? Unfortunately, what the results of those efforts looked like in practice were this. It was basically always ending up like a train wreck. I had, together with some of my colleagues, and unfortunately also some of my presumably more experienced colleagues, we spent so much time automating away, using our trusty, the tool that we knew, to automate all of the regression scripts. And the end result was, well, basically a train wreck. And when the funny thing, when I looked up pictures of train wrecks on Google Images, I ran into this one, and what immediately struck me as funny was the number on the locomotive. I don't know, 503. I don't know if like me, you know too many HTTP codes by heart right now. HTTP status code 503 stands for service unavailable, and that's probably the best description I could give of the work that I did. I was doing a lot of work, but not a lot of service to my clients, really, because it was, yeah, I spent so much time and effort at writing away, automating away things that were incredibly low value. They were low quality scripts. They crashed a lot. They took a lot of maintenance, and that's all because I didn't realize what it took to do test automation well, and I didn't really have the coaches, mentors, the education to understand what it took to do test automation well. Why the test automation had been around for, it has been around for decades now, but I feel that so much of the education around test automation and the way we educate our test automation engineers and our testers in the field of test automation is incredibly short-sighted, and that leads to a lot of crappy and low quality solutions, to be honest. And so I've been in this field for 15 years now, and what I see over and over and over again as I'm an external consultant, so I visit and work with a lot of different teams, different organizations, nowadays even different countries, which is good fun. But what I see happening so often is that what I went through in the past is happening and is replaying over and over and over again with these different teams. They all think, well, I know this tool now and I'm going to automate everything with this tool. And yes, we have these regression test scripts, and that's what we need to focus on. Automate away all of those existing regression test scripts, because that's what makes our test automation so successful. And people keep on falling into the same traps that I fell in for so long in the last couple of years. So, and as this slide says, it's getting tiring, really. It's not making me physically, that's a whole different thing, but I'm getting so tired of people seeing people fall into the same trap. So, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I decided to construct together this talk and give you some insights into what I think people that move into test automation should know about. Because test automation is so much more than just learning about a specific tool. Because I want you to do better than me. It's so incredibly frustrating to see, again, see people make these same mistakes over and over again, because it costs so much time and money and effort, and without the results I think we should be able to obtain by now, given all of the things that failed in the past. But I still see too many test engineers start their career just like learning a specific tool, and then trying to solve everything with that specific tool. So they learn everything there is to know about a specific tool. Could be Selenium, it could be Postman, it could any tool really. I don't really care what tool it is, but it's not very likely that one tool is going to solve all of your problems. So, but I see a lot of people diving really deep into a specific tool, and I used to do that too. I was with my consultancy company, we always took with us one specific tool, and we used that to try and solve every problem there was, even remotely related to test automation with that specific tool. Yeah, the result, again, suboptimal, and that's putting it very mildly. Often these results were so incredibly complex and so incredibly hard to run, hard to maintain, hard to understand, even for people who were not involved with building those solutions from the beginning on, which also made it incredibly difficult to transfer the knowledge of this, of creating these, of how these solutions worked and how to maintain them, how to extend them to other people. So yeah, knowing one tool really well doesn't make you a good test automation engineer, because it's going to, you're going to focus on solving every problem in the world with that specific tool, and that's not going to work. It didn't work for me, and it likely won't work for you either. Yeah, as I said, it takes more than knowing a single tool or 2 or 10 to become a good test automation engineer. So in this talk, I want to highlight some of the, what I think are key, some key things that you should know, that you should understand, that you should be skilled at to become a good test automation engineer. And yes, that involves tools. Yes, that involves some programming knowledge, but there's more. There's much more, because test automation is this incredibly, it's complex. It is a form of software development. It has to do with testing. It's part of an overall software development, the task of a software development team. So this whole test automation thing, it's a mixture, a blend of a lot of different types of fields and skill sets. And so if you want to do this well, you need to know about a lot of different things. And that's what, and I would like to highlight some of the things, at least the things I think are important for a good test automation engineer to know a little bit more about. And that all starts, and hopefully this doesn't come as a surprise to you, but too often I think it does come as a surprise to some people that want to go into test automation. You need to know what good software testing looks like. You need to know what it means to do software testing. So many test automation engineers I meet, I talk to, I work with, they don't want to do software testing because that's not fancy, that's not cool, it earns less. Test automation pays more, so I don't want to have anything to do with what they call manual testing anymore. The issue I have with that is that you're not replacing one with the other. It's not, I don't do manual testing anymore, now I'm going to do test automation. You're doing test automation, but test automation is not a replacement for testing. It's basically, if you want to ask my definition of test automation, it's the ability to use tools to perform specific testing activities more efficiently. So we have this incredibly broad spectrum of activities that together are known as software testing. Critical thinking, asking questions, exploration, running experiments. And some of those tasks, and in the end, it's all about getting information, retrieving information about the quality and potential risks of the software product that we're developing. It's all about getting information. And to me, test automation is nothing more than using tools to get some pieces of that information a little bit more to the service a little bit more efficiently. So does this still, and does trinket A still work when I push code snippet B? Or if I make this change, or if I enter this data, is my application going to respond with this specific status code? Or is this specific element going to be shown on the screen? Those are all pieces of information that I can probably obtain through the use of test automation more efficiently, but they're just a part of what it is that a good software tester does. If everything you do as a tester can be done by tools, you're probably not going to do. You're probably not doing a whole lot of good high-value testing, to be honest, because good testing means there are so many things to testing that could never be automated. So in order to do test automation well, that means you need to know what good software testing looks like, and what a good software tester does, and focus on making that activity, be the ability to perform that activity more efficiently. So yes, it means that you should use tools. You should also know which of the activities that are performed by testers can be supported by tools, and which of the many things that testers do should be left to human beings instead of just trying to automate everything, because it's not going to work. And finally, just the fact that you can automate something doesn't mean that you should automate it. The end goal is to make things more efficient using test automation, getting information to the service more efficiently, shortening feedback loops, the ability to get the same piece of information or the answers to the same type of questions, really, over and over and over again in a more efficient way. That's, to me, what test automation is all about. And that's something that you should use to support testing, not to replace testing. So please start there. If you want to be a better test automation engineer, please become a better software tester first. Immerse yourself, know what it means to do good software testing, because only then you know which parts of software testing you can for which parts of software testing you can use tools to do things more efficiently. So you're part software as a test automation engineer. You should know things about software and to do test automation. You should know things about software testing. It's also, and that's probably something you've heard say a lot. Test automation is software development. So if you want to do it well, if you want to write test automation solutions that are easy to use, that are maintainable, that are reliable, that scale well, that's software development. Which means that if you want to do test automation well, you should also focus on becoming a better software developer. Because a lot of the things that good software developers do are equally applicable to test automation. And that even applies with these low code, with all of the low code tools that you see in the market nowadays. So even if you're not directly writing the code yourself, if you're doing test automation, it's perfectly fine if you do, because a lot of efficient test automation solutions are code-based. But even if you use a low-code solution, which is nothing more than an abstraction on top of that same code. So you're using a different syntax to create your test. So you don't do it in Java or in Python or in C# or in JavaScript. No, you use a modeling language or a graphical user interface or a keyword-driven syntax, in case of Robot Framework, for example, to create your tests. You're still writing software. So that means you still need to know what it is to do software development well, to be able to apply specific good programming practices, even if you're not writing the code directly. So, what does it mean? Some of the things that pop into my head when I think about, well, what does it mean to do software development well is applying good programming practices and patterns. So those are the patterns and the principles that make your code well structured, easy to maintain, easy to read, and readability and maintain. Keep that in mind. And this the former that the applying good will lead hopefully to readable and maintainable solutions. Things like refactoring early enough. Don't just write a whole bunch of tests and then only then take a step back and, well, maybe I've done a lot of duplication here, or maybe things can be made easier to read. No, do that early, do that often, and keep those cycles short. Do a lot of code reviews, stuff like that, because that definitely helps you. And those are things that you don't need to tell that to software developers, because that's what they do. And we should do that when we do test automation as well. Code reviews are an immense help in achieving this. And don't just do this between test automation engineers. Also involve your software developers here, because that's what they do. That's what they're best at, writing, at least hopefully, writing high quality software that's readable, that's maintainable. So, and that should be your goal when you do test automation as well. Things like making your tests part of a continuous integration, a build pipeline, stuff like that. Because that's how the product that you're building as a team or as an organization is published, is created. So your tests should be an integral part of that, because tests are only valuable if they are run. And the easiest way to ensure that they are run and that they run often and that they deliver the information that they're supposed to deliver often and at the right times is by automating the process of executing them. And this is something that's hard in general software development. If tests have exceeded their their useful lifetime, if they are getting stale, if they are getting old, don't be afraid to throw them away. That's hard because you spend a lot of time writing them and maintaining them. But at some point, it's just better to throw them away. And that's something that, that's also part of software development. So don't be afraid to go through your existing test automation code base from time to time and say, well, are all of these tests still valuable? Are they still delivering the value that they initially gave to us, or is just because just having tests for the sake of having tests is not something that you should aspire to, really. Just having more tests doesn't mean better quality. It doesn't mean that you're doing better as a team. So if the only reason that you're keeping your tests is to keep your code coverage up, I think you should rethink your strategies and your end goals for your test automation, really. Basically, even and this applies even when you're using these low-code tools, because those are just an abstraction on top of the actual code. So you don't write the code yourself; it's being called or generated through this extra abstraction layer that is put on top of the code to make it easier for you to start writing those tests. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you realize that underneath that abstraction layer that you use, that nice graphical user interface, or those keywords, or that modeling language that you use, there's still code. In the end, it's all zeros and ones. So using low-code tools does not absolve, it does not say, well, then all of these good programming practices and patterns and principles can be thrown out of the window because we have low code now. That's not how it works. If you want to create something that's maintainable, that's well structured, even when you're using these low-code tools, please keep those principles and patterns and practices in mind. Or risk ending up with something like this, which could just be an architectural. This could have just been an architectural diagram of some of the solutions that I've built back in the day, really, and that I've had the misfortune of working on for the last earlier in my career. So hopefully I'm now doing a little better. At least I'm trying, and I'm also trying to help others do better, because to me, a lot of my work nowadays is trying to help others do better. But that doesn't mean that I know it all. I just hope that the things that I do the things that I do today look a little bit less like what you see on the slide here, and a little bit more like something that's actually easy to maintain and easy to understand and easy to run, not just by me, but also by the people who have to work with it long after I'm gone. The third thing, so we had software testing, we had software development. There's also this thing, this sounds incredibly vague or managerial or highbrow, or it's not. Test automation strategy. So a lot of the people I know and that I've worked with, and they move into test automation, and it's immediately all about tools. It's immediately all about which tools should I use? What's the best tool? I hate that question. What's the how can I use this tool to solve this problem? So it's all about the how to do this, how to do that, what tool, how can I solve this problem? And yes, that's the most fun part. Absolutely. Playing around with tools is incredibly is fun, is the fun part, and it's also a big part of your job as a test automation engineer. But the how, it's only it should be only the final part, and I've got a suspicion that a lot of people tend to forget that from time to time, and not just people, teams and organizations too. And they're so focused on implementing a specific tool that they're forgetting to take a step back and ask things like, why are we doing this test automation thing in the first place? Because if you don't know why you're doing this in the first place, how do you know when you've succeeded? What do you know? How do you know what success looks like? Questions like who? Who is going to do this test automation thing? Are we going to turn all of our existing testers into test automation engineers? Are we going to ask the developers? Are we going to recruit these software development engineers in test? Those magical unicorns that can do everything. It's something that it's a question, and a lot of people say, well, it sounds like testing, so let's give that to the testers. And but as you heard me talk about previously, yes, it's part software testing, but it's also part software development, which also means that your testers should learn more about what it takes to be a good software developer. They need software development skills. In the end, to me, people sometimes ask me, what do you want? Do you want the developers to do the test automation? Do you want the testers to do the test automation? Yes, is my answer. So, or I don't really care as long as it gets. I don't care if it's the janitor who does the test, as long as it gets done. And in some cases, and so with some teams, it's probably a better choice to give that task to the developers. And in other cases, it might be that it's a good match for a tester with a specific skill set. Or maybe in a third, it makes sense to temporarily or permanently hire people who are already experienced in doing this. So, but it's an important question to ask yourself. The what question, what tests are we going to automate? At what level are we going to start our automation? Are we going to start with unit tests? Please, yes, please do that. What types of tests are we going to focus on? Are we going to focus on automating our existing regression tests? Or are we going to focus on writing tests for new functionality first? Things like that. They're all incredibly important questions too. And they all should come before the how, before you start thinking about tools, to be honest. And the when, how is this going to be part of our software development lifecycle? How is this going to fit inside our sprint, for example? So just running around in a company saying why and what and where and when and who, that's not going to make you very highly valued or popular even. So here are just some examples of more targeted questions. And I think I've addressed most of them sort of kind of indirectly when I talked about the previous slide. But these are some of the questions that I tend to ask if I'm helping out people with a test automation strategy. I don't have all the answers to this, but I do believe all of the time, because a lot of time it depends on the situation, on the team, on the context, really. But these are the questions, just some examples of the questions that I think you should, these make up a solid test automation strategy. And yes, that includes the how, so it includes which tools are we going to use and what programming language. But you can only really be successful if next to the how, you've also covered the why, the what, the who, and the when, because otherwise you're just going to, create a situation that reminds me a lot of Jurassic Park. This is the Jurassic Park quote, where the scientists were so busy trying to see if they could get something to work that they forgot to ask if that was even a good idea in the first place. So and people and teams and always overly focusing on the how of test automation, on the tools, on the how to solve problems with tools. Too often they suffer from this exact phenomenon, from being so preoccupied with getting things to work and getting these green check marks and getting these tools into place and getting to X% code coverage. Without asking themselves, well, why are we doing this in the first place? And are we doing, is what we're doing even contributing to the end goals? Because the end goal is never to have more automated tests. The end goal is to be able to deliver value to your customers in a shorter amount of time, with confidence, with predictability, and with at least a good insight into the potential risks of putting something into production. And yes, test automation can contribute to that, but the end goal is never more test automation. So, or at least, and no client of mine has ever come up to me and said, well, can you please give me 5 kilograms of test automation? Because it's a means to an end and not an end goal in of itself. Sometimes, but too often I see people treating it like it's some sort of magical end goal in and of itself, and all of their other problems will go away. And that's, to me, an example of a failing test automation strategy, really. That's also good. Tools, yes. And again, the fun part of test automation for me as well. Yes, you should know about tools. And to be more precise, you should know about a lot of different types of tools. This includes programming languages, be it Java or C# or Python or JavaScript or whatever is used in your organization. Things like unit testing frameworks. JUnit for Java, NUnit for C#, PyTest for Python, Mocha for JavaScript. There are so many of them. You should know what they are, what they do, and what their role is in an overall test automation solution. API libraries and tools, things like rest assured for Java, requests for Python, Postman, the low-code graphical user interface driven API testing tool. Things like that. UI testing libraries, as Selenium WebDriver, Appium, Cypress, Playwright, WebDriver IO, so many out there these days. At least have some of those in your, add these to your skill set. 2, it helps to know a little bit about performance testing tools and how they work. So that's just a couple of examples, Apache JMeter or Gatling if you want to write your performance test as code. But having some decent or at least some basic knowledge about how to set up a basic performance test is an incredibly valuable skill to have as a test automation engineer too. Libraries that support behavior-driven development. These are not strictly test automation libraries. They are used in test automation. They support test automation, but their end goal is a little bit broader than just contributing, being part of a test automation solution. And the most popular one is Cucumber, SpecFloat, basically Cucumber, but for .NET. There are a couple of smaller players in the market as well, but you should know what these tools do too and what their role is in the overall spectrum, in the overall world that is test automation. Things like mocking or stubbing libraries. So for unit testing, libraries like Mockito or Mock with a Q or PyTest Mock for Python, or HTTP mock servers like WireMock or Hoverfly or Traffic Parrot, or so many examples out there. But at least have some basic knowledge of these, because these all play a part in test automation, because it helps you deal with dependencies that you need for your integration or end-to-end testing, but that you can't rely on, or that you don't want to rely on. That's mostly the case of unit testing. You don't want to rely on the implementation of that, so you need of classes that have a relationship with the class that you're actually testing. So you need to isolate the behavior from your class from that of its dependencies. So that's why you use mocking libraries for. So have some knowledge about these types of, because they do play an incredibly important part in creating efficient test automation as well. And basically what it boils down to is, please don't become this like Selenium with Java expert, or at least don't become just a Selenium with Java expert alone, because again, what that's going to lead to in the end is, because you know just a single tool and just a single language, the end result is you're going to try and solve every problem out there with that specific tool. And I don't think more often than not, that single tool that you know is not the most efficient solution to the problem at hand. And so knowing, it's much more about knowing the different types of tools out there, what role they play in an overall test automation solution. To me, that's much more important than just knowing everything there is to know about a specific tool or everything there is to know about a specific programming language, because maybe the next team you're going to work with, you're going to work in, uses different tools, require different types of testing, uses a different programming language. So, and if all you know is that specific tool or that specific language, you're going to have a hard time. It's going to take a lot of time for you to adjust to that new situation, to learn these new tools. So I typically compare this to a tool belt. As a test automation engineer, you should have a large tool belt filled with a lot of different tools. And you don't need to know everything about every single tool out there, but at least you need to know something about the different types of tools that are out there and the role they play and what their underlying principles and patterns are, because that makes it so much easier to pick up a new one. So instead of knowing everything there is to know about Java, I think it's probably much more useful to learn what object-oriented programming looks like and what it means, what patterns and principles there are, because they are not specific to Java. They are not specific to C# or Python. No, they are specific to object-oriented programming. So it's probably a much better way to study those fundamentals first before you dive deep into a specific language or a specific tool. And it also helps at things like what you see often with tools like Selenium are things like page object patterns and base pages or the screenplay pattern. They are just forms of fundamental patterns and principles of object-oriented programming. So a page object is nothing more than an application of the encapsulation principle of object-oriented programming. So, but if you understand and you see that, it's much easier to know when and when not to apply these things. But that requires you to have a much broader focus and a much broader type of knowledge than just knowing what a specific pattern does or knowing what a specific tool does and knowing how a specific language works. And the final, so we had software testing, software development, test automation strategy, test automation tools, and the final part is test automation engineering, which to me, as I define this as everything you need to not make your tests feel like a fish out of water. So it's great that you run all these tests, and it's great that they run on your machine, but apart from when you write them, they're never going to be run on your machine again. So you need to be able to collaborate with other test automation engineers, with developers, with testers on your automated tests. They're probably going to be part of some sort of continuous integration or continuous delivery pipeline. So because only then they're going to be run often, and only then they're going to be run efficiently, and only then they will properly become an integral part of your software development lifecycle. So, and you need specific tools to do that too. And for me, that's what I refer to as test automation engineering. You could call it software. You could call it, that's just a label. But things like version control play a big part here. So, and know what version control is, what it does. And basically, because basically everybody's using Git now, that's probably your best bet, and know something about Git. Things like build tools, package managers, Maven or Gradle for Java, and NuGet for C#, pip for Python, npm for Node. Many of these, and again, focus on what these tools do, what their responsibilities are, because they share a lot of similarities. And yes, it's wonderful if you know everything there is to know about Maven, but if you have no idea what NuGet does, or pip does, or npm does, it's not going to help you if you get working on a project where they don't use Java, but they use Python or C# or JavaScript or anything. So know a little bit about build tools and package managers, what they do and how they fit into the overall picture of developing and committing and running your tests. And of course, since the whole process of the creation and the delivery of software is automated these days using tools like Jenkins or GitLab or Azure DevOps or Circus CI or Travis CI or Bamboo, or I could go on for a while. Learn a little bit about the CI, continuous integration orchestrators as well. How do they work? What do they do? And again, you don't need to know the ins and outs of all of these tools, but know what they do, know how they operate. Again, and know what their role in the overall software delivery process is. That's going to help you massively to see the bigger picture and know what they do. And knowing what they do in general also makes it much easier to find out how to do specific stuff with a specific tool, because you know what to Google for, really. If you don't know what all these tools and these techniques and these kind of libraries do, you're going to have a hard time finding out how to do it exactly, because to me, you don't need to know that. All of that, most of the how is just a single Google search away. It's the why you do things and what do I want to achieve in the first place. Those are the hard questions, and those are the things I think it's much more valuable to focus on as a test automation engineer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to wrap up quickly, Jonas. I'm taking up a lot of time, I see. I'm almost at the end, so don't worry if this rambling has been going on for a little too long now. Yes, so we've addressed a lot. Again, know more about software testing, know more about software development, know more about test automation tools, about test automation strategy, about test automation engineering. Wow, boss, that's a lot of things I need to know more about. Yep, true. Took me 15 years. I'm still learning. There's plenty of things I still don't know and know nothing about. So there are new tools and new practices and new things I learn about every single day. And again, I've been doing this and for 15 years now. But that's also what keeps it interesting. What helps me enormously is starting small. And just don't try and do everything. And break your problem down into tiny sub-problems, tiny questions. Write a simple test first. See if you can get it to run. See if you can get it to fail. See if you can and make tiny changes, create a second test. Then try and put it in version control. Try and create a pull request for it. Try and the stuff like that. And then what does it take me to do to make a continuous integration orchestrator like Jenkins pick this up? How does that work? So if your end goal is to go, well, yeah, automate everything, that's an enormous task that it's very hard to say, well, I need to start there. But if you start small and break your problem down into small, tangible questions, and know who else in your team or in your organization can help with these specific questions, and you're going to see that you'll make progress soon enough. And it also it makes you it keeps you motivated, because if you see these small steps, you can see progress. You have these small wins, and you see yourself progress, and that's incredibly important if you want to stay motivated, and if you want to have some sense of, well, now I'm getting somewhere. But don't and don't fall into the trap of diving really deep into one specific problem and losing sight of the bigger picture here. For every how thing that you solve, for every how question that you answer, how am I going to do this? Please also try and keep in mind, what does this mean for the bigger picture? What piece of the puzzle did I place in its right position here? How does this tiny step bring me a little bit closer to solving my overall problem? Because it's incredibly, I've fallen for this so many times in the past. So diving really deep into a specific and just losing the bigger picture out of sight, and then spending days or weeks trying to get something to work, and only then to find out, well, this wasn't really all that valuable anyway. So please try and keep that bigger picture in mind, even if you're going a little deeper into these smaller problems. To wrap things up, a couple of resources that I think can help you learn. First of all, I don't think I need to introduce this to you, but Ministry of Testing is a wonderful community that can help you with a lot of different things regarding testing and test automation as well. So they organize these meetups. They have a dojo. They have a lot of online resources that can help you become a better tester and a better test automation engineer. Test Automation University is an online platform, for those of you who've never heard of it before, like Pluralsight or Udemy, but really specific, as its name suggests, to test automation. So there are a lot of online video courses on there that teach you more about test automation, not just about specific tools or specific languages, specific libraries, but also these broader questions. And a lot of time and effort is spent on how is this part of the bigger picture. And the best part of it's all completely free. For those of you who like to read books, I love to recommend this little book to everybody. A Practical Guide to Testing in DevOps has a lot of good advice and tips for being a software tester in the modern world, and the role that test automation plays in there as well. This too, even though the recommended price is like 12 Australian dollars, the minimum price on Leanpub is $0. So you can get it legally for absolutely free. But the best way to learn all of this kind of stuff is not to watch videos, is not to read a book, it's to practice and then fail and learn from that failure and practice some more and just keep on practicing. And one thing I should add to this is work together, pair with people who are trying to learn the same thing as you. Learn from people who've done it, who know how to solve the problem that you're facing. Don't let them solve it for you, but ask them, hey, can you help me here? Because that's a great way to become better, to make that next step, and to finally, in the end, become that better test automation engineer. So this was a lot of sound and a lot of talk and a lot of things I wanted to talk about from my end. I've written this all down too. So again, this talk has been recorded by Jonas, so you can watch it later if you want to. I've also written most of the advice that I've given in this talk down in a free ebook, a test automation learning path, published by the people at Eurostar. Also, this one is completely free in exchange for your email address. So feel free to have a look at this as well. It's basically a written down version of this talk. That's it, really. I don't know, Jonas, how much time did you allocate? Did you allocate any time for, because I know I've been talking for quite a bit of time now. I don't know if you have a closing time for this meetup in mind and if there's time for a couple of questions.
Yeah, I would say it's time for a couple of questions, even if we pass the time. But there were one written for a long time ago here. How to organize an automation framework.
How to organize an automation framework?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a broad question. That's an incredibly difficult, an incredibly general and broad question, because that can mean that could relate to so many different of the questions that I addressed when I talked about test automation strategy. And it can be who does, so many things play a role there. Who does things? When are you going to write tests? What kind of tests are those? What kind of tools do you use? But some general advice is keep things small. And that's both in terms of your tests themselves. So tests should be as small as possible, but also at the modules, the artifacts that you write. So for example, things like classes and functions and others, keep them small, because all of those things should do exactly one thing and do them very well. And if you keep that in mind in general, so if you see a test that does two separate things, create two tests instead of one. If you see a class that tries to do two things at once, maybe you can refactor those into two separate classes. And yes, you get more classes and more tests. And first of all, if you get more tests, that looks good on a dashboard, but it also keeps your tests much easier to maintain. And that's probably the best piece of advice I can give, general piece of advice I can give with regards to organization. Think really hard, really well about modularity and reusability, and see if you can find common reusable building blocks, because that's going to make it so much easier to reuse and to maintain existing artifacts and existing components of your test automation solution.
Yeah, there have been two more questions here. The first one was how about automating the testing of the automated tests?
Automating the testing of the automated tests.
Yeah.
Woo, good one. In general, I don't think enough attention is being given to the quality of our automated tests. So I like this question a lot, because I think we spend a lot of time writing automated tests and a lot of time on getting information about the quality of the product that our team is building. What we tend to forget sometimes is the quality of those automated tests. So you should definitely, test your tests, and that means, can my tests fail? And if they fail, do they fail in a predictable way? Do they give information that's clear for me, that's actionable? And do they not, can my tests even fail? Because I don't trust, as people tend to say, and as I find myself saying a lot as well, never trust a test you haven't seen fail. I don't trust tests that only pass, that only give green check marks, because I want to know, can they even fail in the first place? One type of technique that can help there is a technique called mutation testing. I'm pretty sure that some, maybe most of you are at least have heard of it. And that's a technique that can actually help you test your automated tests in an automated way. So basically, the 30-second summary is, it creates small variations, small deviations, small mutants in your application code, runs your unit tests and tries to see if those unit tests fail, because when your unit tests fail, that means they picked up on the defect. If your unit tests keep on passing, something's wrong. So that's the most concrete form of automated testing of your automated tests that I know of. And unfortunately, it's only really viable for unit tests. So it can theoretically, it can be done with different types of tests as well, but I've only ever seen it used effectively with unit testing.
A comment. It's Björn who asked the question. I've seen this a lot in safety testing on system level as well, but then we call it fault injection, not mutation.
Ah. Okay, thank you. I have for that could, as I said, that theoretically it can work for other types of testing as well, as long as you have an efficient way of injecting these creating these mutants or injecting these failures. If it requires you to change source code, build and deploy an application somewhere, then run all of the acceptance tests against it to see if they pick up on the failure, that's going to be a pretty long-running process. But if you have a more direct way of injecting those faults, it could very well be a viable solution. Yeah, absolutely.
And next question was, which are the main factors you consider when deciding whether a test activity is suitable for automation or not?
Good question. So I think the underlying question is, how do we know if something should be automated? Again, at first, it's not because something can be automated doesn't automatically mean that it should be automated. There are a couple of questions I ask myself. I've learned to ask myself here that can help. And one of them is this the most efficient way to get the information that we're looking for? So if we are, is automating those tests, is that the most efficient way to find that piece of information that we're looking for? Maybe just running some tests manually from time to time is a more efficient way. So that's one. And that also helps me determine if my test automation approach is the most effective way. Do we really need an end-to-end test for this, or can this be done with some smaller scale integration or even unit tests? And do I really need this information before I am going to deploy? That helps me decide, well, do I want to automate this test? Because automated tests are typically run before you deploy something into a testing environment or a production environment or anything. So for me, is because every test gives a little bit of information. And unless you really need that information before you do something, and that do something can be deploy into production, it's a nice to have at best. And we all know that nice to haves are the first ones that you can safely skip if time gets crunched. So if we had all the time in the world, we would automate much more. But we don't have all of the time in the world. So those are some questions that help me determine, well, should we really automate this, and think more in terms of what piece of information is this test giving me, and how important is that piece of information to me, to my team, to the organization, or to the whole process.
Yeah, maybe the last question here then. It's I'm an exploratory testing engineer and need to provide test cases to automation engineers. Should I think just about priorities for users? What is the most important functionality, or I need to check what really can be automated too? Any tips what behavior functionality never should be automated?
So there are a lot, as an exploratory testing engineer, or what people sometimes call manual testing engineers, it's your job to find information about the quality of your project, of your product, and about potential risks to, for example, your customers, your users, and deciding what gets your, and as an exploratory testing engineer, you should be one of the most, I think you are one of the most important sources of information for what gets automated. Again, I've seen someone, and I've been that test automation engineer in the past as well, who just said, well, we're going to automate everything. But first of all, it takes a lot of time and effort, and you end up with this large sphere of automated tests that have no, maybe some of them have value, but a lot of them will not have value. So it's still all about supporting testing. So if, as an exploratory testing engineer, you find some key pieces of information or key things that are high risk that you want to, I really want to make sure that no matter what happens, every time we add something to our code base, every time we are about to release a new version into production, I really need to make sure that this is working. I really do not want this risk to happen. I really want this piece of information to be sure that this little piece of our application is of the quality that my customers expect it to be. Those are the things that are the best candidates for automation. So it's, in the end, it's still about, the end goal is finding that information, gathering that information in as efficient a way as possible. And as a tester with presumably a lot of knowledge about the risks, about what it is that your end users want, you are a great source of knowledge on what is important to these, what are things of high risk, where are the risks, what do my customers really value, and those are the things I should consider adding to the automation suite first.
Now it showed up one more question. Maybe take that one, and now it define it as the last one. Any suggestion if test automation tests should be part of main Git project, so they get triggered at build events and that changes to test triggers rebuild of main software, or if they should stay in a separate Git repo and risks getting out of sync with main Git project?
Oh, that is the age-old question of where to or how to organize my tests and where to put them. I think as close to your application as possible, because that's the easiest way to keep them in sync. And for unit tests, this is sort of kind of obvious because they are just part of your, or hopefully they are part of your application's code base. But for the other types of tests, I try to keep these as close to my application code as possible, because that's because often I want my developers to run my tests. I want my developers to collaborate on creating those tests. And the easiest way to get them to do that is by providing them with those tests, creating those tests together with them, and making the running of those tests an integral part of my pipeline. Now, I know that's not always possible, and not every developer says, well, yes, that's a good idea, but I think it's the best way to keep everything in sync and make sure that those tests are actually run often. And if you experience something like, if your test run takes 2 hours, that's probably not something that you want to do on every commit or even on every pull request. But then you should think really hard about, do we really need all of those tests to be run every time? Which tests do I need to run on every, do I want to run on every commit or before every commit even? But you can only do that and do that efficiently if those tests are really, really close to your application. And sometimes that means they're in the same code base. Sometimes that's just not as easy to do that, but in general, I keep them as close as possible because they are just part of the production process, really.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you for a great talk. Many have thanked you in the chat. So let's give Bas a big virtual applause for his talk. And thank him.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all, everybody, for joining and for taking some time out of your day or at the end of your day to attend this meetup, to listen to me. Thanks once again, Jonas, for having me.
No.
It's been a pleasure. If you want to get in touch at some point, email is probably the best bet. bas@testautomation.com. I'm happy to have a chat on anything related to test automation, really. I blog sometimes at testautomation.com, and I am sort of kind of active on LinkedIn, though not as much as I used to be a while ago. But if you want to reach out there, I'm more than happy to connect and stay in touch with like that as well. Thanks once again to you, Jonas, to Passion for Testing, and to all of you who attended. Have a great evening or night or day, wherever you are. That's the that's the fun thing about these virtual meetups, that people from everywhere around the globe suddenly jump in and say, well, hey, whereas previously they probably wouldn't take the trouble to come to Sweden for this.
No.
So yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye.
I will, yeah, bye.
Oh, sure. If you want to, did you want to add anything to?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that I will publish this on YouTube when it's done. Yeah.
Excellent.